Every parent dreams of the day their child begins a new chapter of life, a wedding, a celebration of love, a promise of family bonds extending beyond one's own blood. For years, I carried that dream quietly in my heart, through long nights of sacrifice and mornings heavy with work, determined that my daughter would have the kind of life her mother once wished for her. But sometimes, dreams don't unfold the way we imagine. Sometimes, the very people we welcome into our homes, the ones we trust to care for those we love most, reveal a cruelty so sharp it cuts deeper than any blade. On the day that should have been my daughter's happiest, I found myself humiliated before her and everyone else, betrayed, not just by the man she thought she loved, but by the silence of those who should have spoken. This story isn't just about a wedding gone wrong. It's about the fragile ties of family, the weight of dignity, and the moment when truth refuses to stay buried any longer. The morning sun stretched over the quiet street of Willow Lane, its light spilling across cracked sidewalks and tired houses whose paint had long since peeled away. Mine was one of them, a modest home I'd held onto through storms, debt collectors, and the aching solitude of raising a child alone. It wasn't much compared to the polished estates where my daughter now spent her evenings, but within these walls lived the story of her childhood. Every scrape, every bedtime story, every whispered promise. "Dad, you really should think about selling this place." Vivienne had told me months earlier, her voice careful, almost rehearsed. "Jasper says the neighborhood is, well, outdated." And, I had smiled faintly then, not because it didn't hurt, but because I had learned long ago that sometimes silence speaks louder than arguments. This house wasn't just wood and nails, it was the very proof that love could outlast hardship. It was where I had held her after her mother passed, where I built her first bed from pine, sanding it until my palms blistered. Outdated? Perhaps. But it was ours. Vivienne was everything I had lived for, sharp-minded, kind-hearted, and beautiful in ways that reminded me so much of her mother, Maria. I had worked every extra shift, repaired every engine, and skipped meals if it meant she would never feel less than the other children at school. Her laughter once filled these rooms, the sound of a little girl who never saw the weight her father carried. But things change. Since she met Jasper, her world had grown brighter, richer but also more distant. He came from a family whose wealth glimmered like their polished cars and gilded invitations. I had met men like him before, men who measured worth in numbers and status, not in the strength of one's hands or the sacrifices made quietly in the dark. The first dinner I shared with them made this painfully clear. Their table was a mirror of their lives, wide, gleaming, covered with dishes I couldn't pronounce. Jasper's mother, elegant in a dress that probably cost more than my truck, leaned in toward her son's fiancé. "So, darling, you'll be moving into the estate after the wedding, yes? There's plenty of room, and of course, it's more fitting than—" Her eyes flicked toward me, a quick cut disguised as a smile. "This humble little neighborhood." Vivienne had laughed nervously, squeezing my hand under the table, but I felt the heat of humiliation burn through my chest. I didn't respond. I never do, not with words. My life has been measured not in sharp retorts, but in steady endurance. Later that night, Jasper pulled me aside, as if we were equals sharing some private truth. His cologne was sharp, his smile sharper. "Mr. Reyes," he began, "I know you've done your best for Vivienne, and she appreciates it, truly. But now she deserves more, stability, security. The kind of life only I can provide." I stared at him, my jaw tightening. "And what do you think I've given her all these years?" He chuckled softly. patting my shoulder like a man humoring a child. Love, of course. But love doesn't pay for penthouses or travel. Don't worry. She'll be taken care of. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the photograph of Maria in her wedding dress. Her eyes had once held all the faith in the world. I touched the chain around my neck where her ring still hung and whispered, I promised. I'll protect her, no matter what. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparations I wasn't truly included in. I was present, yes, but always at the edge of things, a silent figure carrying boxes, signing checks, making myself useful so as not to become a burden. The seating chart placed me far from the head table. The suits they suggested for me were expensive rentals I could hardly afford. And yet, for Vivian's sake, I endured it all. Then came the rehearsal dinner. The chandeliers above sparkled like constellations, and the guests laughed too loudly, sipping wines older than my daughter herself. I took my seat quietly. But the conversations around me swirled with words meant to exclude business deals, vacation homes, names of people I'd never meet. At one point, Jasper raised his glass. To Vivian, the most radiant bride-to-be, and to her father a simple man, but one who clearly raised her well enough to find someone like me. The laughter that followed stung sharper than any insult. My daughter's face flushed crimson, her eyes darting toward me with silent apology. But I only smiled, lifting my glass in return, swallowing the bitterness with a dignity they would never understand. Because dignity, I've learned, doesn't come from wealth or applause. It comes from standing tall, even when the world tries to make you small. But that resolve would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. The wedding day arrived bright, warm, with music floating through the air like a promise. I adjusted the tie that felt foreign around my neck and walked toward the hall, the same hall where my daughter's new life would begin. What I didn't know then was that humiliation was waiting for me, sharpened and deliberate, and it would come not from strangers, but from the man who vowed to love her. The morning of the wedding rehearsal, I rose before dawn. Old habits die hard. Years of labor had trained me to greet the world before it was ready to greet me. The coffee pot hissed softly in the kitchen, and the aroma filled the house. I poured a cup and sat at the worn wooden table, running my thumb over a deep scratch in the surface. That scar on the wood had been Maria's doing. She had laughed once while chopping vegetables, distracted by Vivian's childish chatter, and the knife had slipped. She had cursed playfully, then kissed the mark as though to seal it. Funny how something so small can outlive the person who made it. By mid-morning, I dressed in the suit Vivian had chosen for me. It was tighter than I liked, the collar scratching at my neck, but she had said I looked handsome. That word alone was worth the discomfort. When I arrived at the hotel ballroom, Vivian was already there, radiant even in rehearsal clothes, her hair pinned back simply. "Dad!" she exclaimed, rushing toward me. She hugged me tightly, her perfume reminding me so much of Maria's Kahlo. For a moment, the years fell away, and I was just a father holding his little girl again. But the moment didn't last. "Ah, Mr. Reyes." Jasper's voice sliced through the room. He strolled over, his arm draped casually around Vivian's shoulders. His eyes lingered on me, calculating. "Glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you'd find parking with, well, the truck you drive." Vivian stiffened slightly, glancing at me. I only nodded, pretending not to notice. The rehearsal dragged on, instructions from the wedding planner, corrections barked in clipped tones, laughter from Jasper's friends when I stepped left instead of right. I smiled through it all, though every chuckle landed like a stone in my chest. At dinner that evening, I found myself seated at the far end of the long table again, between an elderly aunt who barely remembered my name and a cousin of Jasper's who spent the meal scrolling through his phone. Vivian glanced down the table often, trying to catch my eye, but Jasper monopolized her attention with stories of business deals and investments. I ate slowly, my fork heavy in my hand. Food tastes different when you know you are merely tolerated in the room. After dessert, Vivian slipped away from Jasper's side and sat beside me. Her voice was low, filled with guilt. Dad, I'm sorry about all this. I know it feels off. But Jasper's family, they mean well. I looked at her, my daughter whose heart still believed the best in people. Sweetheart, I said gently, good intentions don't sting this much. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. But before she could answer, Jasper called her back to join his parents in a toast. She hesitated only a moment before rising. I watched her walk away, my chest tightening with the weight of helplessness. Later that night, when I returned home, I found myself in the garage. The smell of motor oil and old wood greeted me like an old friend. I sat at the workbench, Maria's photograph propped up in the corner, her eyes steady and kind. They don't see me, Maria, I whispered. Not really, but she still does. That has to be enough. The next day was the bridal shower. I wasn't invited, it was for the women. Jasper's mother had explained with a thin smile. Instead, I spent the afternoon fixing a loose shutter on the house, the hammer in my hand steadier than my heart. I pictured Vivian laughing, surrounded by Jasper's relatives, her joy genuine but perhaps blinding her to the cracks forming beneath her feet. That evening, she called. Dad, I wish you'd been there, she said softly. I was where I needed to be, I replied. So long as you're happy, that's enough. But deep down, I wondered if that happiness was built on sand. The week slipped by in a haze of last-minute fittings and whispered slights. When I arrived to help carry flowers into the hall, one of Jasper's groomsmen smirked. Careful with those, old man. They probably cost more than your paycheck. I paused, the stems heavy in my arms, but said nothing. Words would have only fed his cruelty. Silence, though painful, was my shield. On the eve of the wedding, Vivienne came home to stay the night with me. We sat in the living room, the glow of the old lamp casting her face in soft light. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, just as she had when she was a child. Dad, she whispered, do you like Jasper? The question caught me off guard. I could have lied, could have told her what she wanted to hear, but I had never lied to her, not once in her life. I think, I said carefully, that he doesn't see the world the way you do. And I think love, real love, is about seeing the same world together. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. Instead, she hugged me tightly, her silence heavier than words. That night, long after she had fallen asleep in her old room, I sat alone with Maria's picture once more. Tomorrow, I told her softly, I'll be strong. For Vivian, for you. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and sharp, the kind of day that should have been filled with nothing but joy. I dressed carefully, straightened my tie, and held my head high. But as I walked toward the hall, I felt a heaviness in my chest, a quiet warning that something was about to break. And I was right, because by the end of that day, I would no longer be just the father of the bride. I would become the man humiliated before them all, until an old voice from the past shattered the silence with 4 words that would change everything. Sir, is that you? The wedding hall glistened as though carved from a dream. Chandeliers spilled golden light across polished marble floors, and flowers arched over every table like delicate crowns. Guests whispered in admiration, their jewelry catching the glow, their laughter echoing beneath ceilings so high it felt like the heavens themselves had bent to watch. And there I was, standing at the entrance, adjusting the sleeves of a suit that felt borrowed from a life I had never lived. Vivienne appeared at the far end of the aisle, radiant in her gown. For a moment, the chatter hushed. My daughter, my little girl, transformed into a bride, her veil catching the light like spun glass. My chest swelled, a mixture of pride and grief. Pride, because she had grown into everything Maria had hoped she would be. Grief, because this moment also meant she was slipping further away from me. "Dad," she whispered, as we stood together, ready to walk down the aisle. Her hand trembled in mine. "Stay strong, okay?" I smiled gently. "For you, always." We walked, step by step, as the music swelled. Every eye followed us. Some glistened with tears, others with envy, and a few I noticed with thinly veiled disdain. Jasper stood tall at the altar, handsome and smug, his lips curling slightly as though this ceremony were merely another transaction completed. The vows were exchanged, the kiss sealed, and the applause thundered. For a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind me. Then came the reception. The hall buzzed with chatter as waiters weaved between tables, glasses of champagne raised in endless toasts. I found my place card. Table 12, far from the head table, tucked beside strangers who barely nodded in my direction. I sat quietly, folding my napkin, pretending not to notice the deliberate distance. But then, a voice called, "Mr. Reyes, we saved you a seat up front," Jasper said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. For a fleeting second, relief flooded me. Perhaps this was his way of mending things. Perhaps he wanted me closer to Vivienne. I walked toward the chair they had pulled out for me, grateful, careful, my back straight despite the ache in my shoulder. I reached behind me, preparing to sit. And then it happened. Jasper's hand shot out, yanking the chair away. My body collapsed onto the marble floor with a sickening crack. The music faltered, glasses stilled midair. A hush swept across the room, sharp and suffocating, followed by laughter. Ugly, cruel laughter. "Your place," Jasper's voice cut through, cold and sharp, "is on the floor." The words echoed louder than the fall itself. Pain seared through my shoulder, but it was nothing compared to the fire clawing inside my chest. I looked up, meeting the eyes of the man who had just humiliated me before everyone, the man who claimed to love my daughter. His smirk lingered, satisfied. Around us, guests shifted uncomfortably, some still chuckling, others avoiding my gaze altogether. And then I saw her, Vivienne. Her bouquet slipped from her hands, roses scattering across the floor like spilled blood. Her lips parted, her face pale as paper. She stared at Jasper not with love, but with horror. Then her eyes found me, wide, desperate, ashamed. I steadied myself, pressing one hand against the cold marble, the other clutching the edge of a tablecloth. Slowly, painfully, I rose to my feet. The laughter died in the throats of those who remembered their own dignity too late. I pulled the chair upright myself, scraping wood against stone, and sat down deliberately. Not because I accepted humiliation, but because I refused to let it define me. The officiant cleared his throat nervously, fumbling through words to steer the reception back on course. Guests whispered, desperate to bury what had just happened. Jasper leaned toward his friends, whispering, his lips curled in satisfaction. But then the sound of boots, sharp, deliberate, echoing across the marble floor. A man entered the hall, older, refined, yet carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone who had once worn a uniform. His eyes scanned the room before landing on me, and then he froze. His face drained of color. His voice cracked as he whispered, barely breathing. "Sir, is that you?" The room fell silent again. Forks lowered, conversations died, even the string quartet stopped mid-note. All eyes turned from him to me. I did not answer. Not yet. Vivian looked between us, confusion written across her face. Jasper stiffened, his smirk fading as uncertainty crept into his perfect posture. The man Jasper's father took a step forward, his voice louder now, trembling with reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are in the presence of Sergeant Gabriel Reyes." Gasps rippled through the hall. Murmurs followed, the name carried like wildfire. I sat silently, my shoulders squared, every inch of me screaming dignity even as my body ached from the fall. Vivian's hand clutched mine tightly. She was trembling. And Jasper, for the first time, looked small. The hall was no longer filled with laughter. It was filled with truth. A truth that had waited years to surface. And that was only the beginning. The wedding reception did not recover after that moment. Though the music returned, though wine continued to pour, and laughter eventually tried to crawl back into the hall, an uneasiness lingered in every corner. People glanced at me with new eyes, not the eyes that had mocked, dismissed, or ignored me moments earlier, but with a respect they struggled to reconcile with what they had just witnessed. I remained still, my hands folded neatly in my lap. My body screamed with pain from the fall, but I let no sign of weakness escape. It was not pride, it was survival. Jasper, however, wore no mask. His jaw tightened, his smile vanished, and though he raised his glass when others toasted, I caught the twitch of his fingers as though itching to shatter the stem between them. Vivian sat beside him, pale and trembling. She had barely touched her food, her eyes darting toward me every few minutes, as if seeking reassurance that I still existed, still endured. Each glance was both a plea and an apology, but apologies spoken through eyes could not mend the wound left by silence. The following morning, the newspapers did what whispers could not. Decorated war veteran humiliated at son-in-law's wedding. My name, once buried under years of quiet labor and sacrifice, was suddenly on every page. Stories resurfaced, battles fought in distant lands, medals awarded, comrades saved. The kind of stories I had never told Vivienne in detail, for I wanted her life defined by peace, not war. No. Strangers on the street greeted me with handshakes and nods of respect. Old neighbors who once passed me by with cold eyes stopped to offer gratitude. Even those who had laughed that night at the reception now pretended they had not. But within the new home where Vivian and Jasper lived, the house where I had been given a small corner room, respect was nowhere to be found. "Do you enjoy this?" Jasper's voice hissed late one evening. He stood in the doorway of my room, his silhouette sharp against the dim hall light. I looked up from the wooden rosary beads I was repairing. "Enjoy what?" "This," he spat, waving a newspaper. My face stared back at us both from the front page. My colleagues whispering, my business partners asking questions, my father bowing to you as if you're some god. "Do you realize how that makes me look?" I said nothing. Silence infuriated him more than words ever could. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a growl. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I raised an eyebrow. I was the one lying on the floor. For a moment, his mask cracked. His eyes blazed with naked hatred. You think this changes anything? In this house, you're still nothing. And soon, everyone will remember that. He slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. I exhaled slowly, pressing my palm over the rosary. Not nothing, I reminded myself. Never nothing. Vivian knocked quietly an hour later. Dad? Her voice was soft, guilty. Yes, sweetheart. She stepped inside, her veil of composure slipping. She knelt by my chair, clutching my hand. I didn't know you carried so much. Why didn't you tell me? Because, I answered gently, a father's duty is not to burden his child with scars. Her eyes welled. I should have defended you. Your silence, I whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek, was not betrayal. It was fear. But fear does not last forever. She sobbed quietly, her head against my knee like when she was a child. And in that moment, I knew she had not abandoned me. She was caught between love and loyalty, between truth and survival. But Jasper was not blind. He watched her visits with suspicion. Days turned into weeks, and the tension thickened. At family dinners, Jasper's remarks grew sharper, his tone dripping with disdain masked as jest. Careful, father-in-law, he would sneer. The soup might be too hot for someone of your age. Wouldn't want another fall, would we? Laughter followed from his circle of friends, though not as loud as before. Vivian flinched each time. His father, however, the man who had recognized me at the wedding, treated me with a reverence that unsettled Jasper even more. One evening he visited me privately. Sergeant Reyes, he said quietly, bowing his head. I owe you a debt. Years ago, in the field, a man pulled me from the wreckage of a burning truck. It was you, wasn't it? I studied his face. Yes, I remembered the night. I remembered the smoke, the screams, the weight of his body slung over my shoulder. I nodded once. Emotion flickered across his features, shame, gratitude, awe. If you ever need anything, he said firmly, you will have it. Jasper heard of this meeting. His rage that night shook the walls. You think you can steal my family's respect from me? He snarled, shoving furniture aside. You think being some washed-up soldier makes you better than me? I did not respond, but inside, I knew. The war was no longer fought on foreign soil. It was here, in this house, in these walls, a quiet war of dignity, hatred, and survival. And though I had not chosen it, I would not retreat. That night, as I lay awake in my narrow bed, the moonlight spilling across the floor, I whispered a promise to Maria, my late wife. I will endure for her. And when the time comes, the truth will shatter every lie they've built. Outside my door, I heard Jasper pacing, waiting, plotting. The battle lines were drawn, and the war had only just begun. The days in Jasper's house blurred into one another, mornings of silence, evenings of tension, nights of whispered arguments behind closed doors. But cruelty, when it festers, does not stay hidden for long. It slips into gestures, words, and eventually actions. At first, it was small things. My meals would arrive cold, as if forgotten. The glass of water by my bedside tasted faintly bitter, enough to leave a metallic sting on my tongue. The light bulb in my room burned out. and though I asked for it to be replaced, weeks passed in darkness. I fixed it myself. One afternoon, I caught Jasper smirking as he watched me struggle with the chair, standing on tiptoe to screw the bulb in. Vivian entered then, her smile faltering at the sight. "Why didn't you tell me?" she scolded gently, helping steady the chair. I shrugged. "A soldier doesn't wait for someone else to bring the light." She smiled faintly, but Jasper's glare from the doorway cut it short. The cruelty grew bolder. At dinner, Jasper filled my glass with wine, though he knew I rarely drank. "Loosen up, old man," he said loudly, pressing the cup into my hand. When I refused, he leaned close, his whisper hot with venom. "Drink it! Or do you want everyone to think you're too fragile for a toast?" The room watched. Vivian's hand trembled on her fork. I lifted the glass, touched it to my lips, then set it down, untouched. A ripple of silence spread before someone coughed nervously and conversation resumed. Jasper's face burned red. To him, my refusal wasn't dignity, it was defiance. One rainy evening, Vivian found me coughing violently in my room. My chest burned, my throat raw. She hurried to bring water, panic in her eyes. "What happened?" "I don't know," I rasped. The soup I had eaten hours earlier lingered bitterly on my tongue. Her eyes flickered toward the empty bowl. A suspicion passed over her face, too quick for words, but heavy enough to freeze her hand as she reached for the dish. From the hallway came Jasper's voice, casual yet sharp. "Is the old man finally choking on his pride?" Vivian stiffened. "Jasper, stop." He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "What?" "I'm only saying what everyone's thinking." His gaze swept over me. "Maybe if he can't handle his meals, he should stop being such a burden." "Burden?" Vivian snapped for the first time in weeks. "He is my father." The words struck the air like thunder. Jasper's smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed at her, then at me. He said nothing more, but his silence carried more threat than words. The days that followed were colder. Jasper stopped hiding his contempt. He barked orders at me as though I were a servant. "Clean the yard. Fix the gate. Carry this upstairs." Each command dripped with satisfaction, as though he delighted in forcing me to bend. I obeyed, not because I was weak, but because endurance was my shield. Yet even as I labored, neighbors passing by began to notice. Some greeted me with respect, others muttered quietly at Jasper's audacity. Word spread beyond the walls. And that was what Jasper feared most, not my strength, but the reflection of his cruelty in the eyes of others. Vivienne's torment grew visible. One night, she slipped into my room with an envelope. "Dad," she whispered, "this is some money. Keep it safe, just in case." "In case of what?" I asked softly. Her lips trembled. She didn't answer. I placed the envelope back into her hands. "You need it more than I do." "What I need," I said, brushing her cheek, "is your courage." "Not yet, but when the time comes." She nodded, tears streaming silently. The time came sooner than either of us expected. At a dinner gathering with Jasper's associates, he decided to turn my presence into sport. "Gentlemen," he said loudly, "shall we hear a story from the great war hero himself? Tell us, old man, how many enemies did you kill?" The room fell silent, all eyes on me. I set down my fork. "A soldier does not count the lives he takes, only the ones he saves." A murmur of respect rippled among the guests, but Jasper's laughter cut through it. "Hear that? He doesn't even know." Probably made it all up. Before I could respond, one of his associates spoke up. Actually, I've read the reports. He's telling the truth. The sergeant saved more men than any of us could dream. The room shifted. Respect tilted away from Jasper and toward me. And that, for him, was unforgivable. That night, Jasper cornered me in the courtyard. You think you can humiliate me in front of my colleagues? His face twisted with fury. You're not a hero. You're a parasite, living under my roof. I looked him in the eye. Roofs are built by hands like mine. Remember that. For a heartbeat, he froze, startled perhaps that I had spoken with such calm authority. Then rage consumed him. His fist clenched. He stepped forward. But before he could strike, Vivian appeared in the doorway. Jasper! Her voice trembled, but her eyes blazed. Enough! His hand fell. He stared at her, then at me, his chest heaving. This isn't over, he muttered, storming past us into the night. Vivian rushed to me, gripping my arm. Dad, you can't stay here. He'll... She choked on the rest. I placed my hand over hers. I've faced worse than his anger, and I will not run from him. Her eyes filled with fear, but also with something stronger. Resolve. And in that moment, I knew the tide was shifting. Jasper thought cruelty would break me, but cruelty, when witnessed, does not break it, awakens. And Vivian had begun to awaken. The tension in Jasper's house no longer whispered through the walls. It spoke loudly in every glance, every unfinished sentence, every silence too heavy to ignore. Vivian, once so bright and eager to please her husband, moved like a ghost. Her eyes carried shadows, her laughter rare now fell flat. I could see her spirit splitting, pulled between the love she thought she had chosen and the loyalty she still held for me. But Jasper? He wore his cruelty like a second skin. When others were near, he smiled, charming and gracious, his arm draped over my daughter's shoulders as if to remind the world of his possession. Yet in private, that mask cracked. And when masks crack, they reveal monsters. One morning, he tossed a newspaper onto the table before me. The bold headline read, Respected Veteran Causes Trouble at Business Gathering. My chest tightened. Beneath the headline was an article twisting the truth of the dinner party. It painted me as disruptive, claiming I insulted Jasper's guests, and even suggested that my war stories were delusions of an old man clinging to past glory. I read slowly, each word a dagger. You did this, I whispered. Jasper leaned against the wall, arms folded, smirking. Correction, I arranged it. People believe what they read. And soon, they'll see you not as a hero, but as a senile nuisance. Vivian snatched the paper from my hands, eyes blazing. How could you? He's my father! Jasper's tone shifted, dripping with venom. Number is your weakness. For the first time, I saw Vivian step back from him, as if seeing her husband clearly for the first time. The whispers began. At the market, I overheard murmurs. Did you hear about Sergeant Quaid? Shameful. After all, he claimed he did. Some neighbors avoided my gaze. Others gave me looks of pity, as if I were already half buried. But not all believed the lies. An old comrade, Lieutenant Harris, visited one afternoon, gripping my hand firmly. I don't care what that rag says, he said. I was there. You saved my life more than once. Don't let them tarnish what we know to be true. His faith steadied me, but it also sharpened my understanding. Jasper's attacks were no longer private. He wanted me ruined, erased. Vivian's torment deepened. I overheard one of their late-night arguments through the thin walls. You humiliated him in public, she accused. Now you're trying to destroy him in private too? Don't twist this, Vivian, Jasper snapped. He's poisoning your mind against me. Every time you look at him, you pull further away from us. I won't allow it. He's my father. Who? And I'm your husband. Jasper's voice rose to a roar. Then, quieter, colder. Choose wisely which title means more. Silence followed. A silence so heavy I could almost hear Vivian's heart breaking. The next day, Jasper tried to draw me into his games again. Come along, old man, he said smoothly, gesturing toward his car. We've got an event to attend. What event? I asked. A charity fundraiser. Perfect place for a hero like you. To embarrass himself again. His grin told me everything. He wanted me paraded in front of strangers, a spectacle he could twist to his advantage. I shook my head. No. The grin vanished. What did you say? I said no. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Silence thick as smoke. Then Jasper leaned close, his whisper venomous. Refuse me again, and you'll regret it. Not just you, her. His meaning was clear. He would punish Vivian for my defiance. And so, I went. The fundraiser glistened with chandeliers and silk gowns. Jasper introduced me loudly, with false cheer, to anyone who would listen. This is my father-in-law, the great war hero, he said. Laughter curled around the word hero like poison. I stood tall, shoulders squared. If I was to be paraded, I would not bow my head. A young man approached a journalist. He extended his hand respectfully. Sergeant Quaid, sir, I've heard many stories of your service. Would you mind if I interviewed you? Before I could answer, Jasper interjected. Careful, lad. His stories tend to wander. Laughter trickled around the table. My jaw clenched. But the young journalist didn't laugh. His eyes stayed on mine, steady and clear. Even if they wander, sir, I believe they're worth hearing. For the first time in months, I felt the sting of dignity returning. I accepted the man's hand. Come see me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. Jasper's smile froze. Beneath it, I saw fury. That night, Jasper unleashed his rage. He slammed the door behind him, cornering Vivian. Did you see how he undermines me? In front of everyone? Vivian's voice trembled, but her words carried steel. No, Jasper, he didn't undermine you. You undermined yourself. The silence that followed was dangerous. Then came the sound of something breaking a glass thrown against the wall. I rushed in, my instincts sharpened by years of command. I found Vivian trembling, shards of glass at her feet, Jasper's chest heaving with fury. That's enough, I said, stepping between them. His eyes blazed. Stay out of this! No, I replied, voice calm but unyielding. You've taken my dignity, smeared my name, tried to break me. But you will not break her. Vivian clutched my arm, her tears hot against my sleeve. For the first time, she didn't try to defend Jasper. She didn't try to excuse him. She simply whispered, Dad, I believe you. The word struck me harder than any blow, and in Jasper's eyes, I saw something shift. Not victory, not dominance, fear. Because once belief takes root, lies begin to wither. That night, as I lay awake, I realized something. Jasper wasn't just fighting me, he was fighting truth itself. And truth, though buried, has a way of clawing back to the surface. The mask he wore was cracking, and once it shattered, the world would see him for who he truly was. The question was, how much more damage would he cause before that moment came? The days after the fundraiser settled into an uneasy rhythm, but beneath the calm, I felt the storm building. Jasper no longer tried to hide his contempt. He didn't bother with sweet words for Vivian or false respect for me. His mask had slipped too far. All that remained was a simmering hostility, waiting for an excuse to erupt. Vivian, though, had changed. The words she whispered that night, "Dad, I believe you," became her quiet shield. I noticed the way she lingered near me more often, the way her eyes softened when they met mine. She no longer looked at Jasper with blind devotion. She looked at him with suspicion. And Jasper knew it. One evening, as I sat polishing my old medals at the kitchen table, Jasper stormed in, his face tight with rage. "Enjoying your little victories, old man?" he sneered. I said nothing, but his gaze burned into me. "You think because she sides with you now, you've won?" His lips twisted. "You haven't. You've just given me reason to end this sooner." "And what?" I asked calmly, though my pulse quickened. He leaned down, close enough that I could smell the bitter whiskey on his breath. "End you." For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. He straightened, smiling faintly, and walked away as though he'd spoken about nothing more than the weather. But I knew better. Jasper wasn't bluffing anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed his words again and again. I had faced death before on the battlefield, in the chaos of war, but this was different. This was death wearing the face of my daughter's husband, living under the same roof. I thought of leaving, of escaping to protect Vivian from further conflict. But then I remembered her trembling voice. "Dad, I believe you. If I left, I would be abandoning her to his wrath." And so I stayed. The first attempt came quietly. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, filling the kitchen with rich, savory smells. Vivian had prepared it with care, humming softly as she worked. Jasper slipped in behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist with mock affection. "Smells delicious," he murmured. When her back was turned, I caught the flicker of movement, his hand dropping something small into the pot. My instincts screamed. I crossed the room in 3 steps, seizing the ladle before Vivian could stir. My eyes locked on Jasper's solfo, and for an instant, he froze. "What did you just put in here?" I demanded. Vivian spun around, startled. "What are you talking about?" Jasper smirked. "Paranoid again, old man? Maybe you really are losing it." But I wasn't. I plunged the ladle into the stew, fishing out a half-dissolved tablet. I held it up, dripping, in the light. Vivian gasped. "Jasper, what is that?" His expression didn't falter. "Vitamins. For your father, he needs strength, doesn't he?" The lie was so absurd it chilled me more than if he had admitted the truth. Vivian backed away, her face pale. "You tried to poison him. He reached for her," but she shook her head violently, tears brimming. "Don't touch me!" For the first time, Jasper's charm failed him. The fear in her eyes was no longer hidden. From that day forward, the house became a battlefield. Vivian no longer trusted her husband. She avoided his touch, recoiled at his words. And Jasper, wounded by her rejection, grew more dangerous. I began locking my door at night. Old habits from war returned. Listening for footsteps, sleeping lightly, keeping a heavy cane near the bed like a weapon. Vivian, too, began to plan quietly. She whispered to me one afternoon, her voice trembling. Dad, I want to leave him, but I don't know how. He has power, money, connections. If I try to run, he'll find me. I gripped her hands firmly. You're not alone. We'll find a way. But inside, doubt gnawed at me. Jasper's reach stretched further than I knew. One evening, a stranger knocked on the door. He was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, with eyes that carried the cold detachment of someone accustomed to intimidation. Good evening, he said smoothly. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Jasper Quaid. My gut tightened. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal notice, claiming I was unfit to manage my own affairs. Jasper had petitioned to have me declared incompetent. The man smiled thinly. It's only a matter of time before the court agrees. Best to cooperate. I slammed the door in his face. When I showed Vivian the letter, her hands shook. He's trying to take away your rights. If the court declares you incompetent, he'll control everything, your pension, your property, even where you live. I nodded grimly. And once he has that, he'll make sure I disappear quietly. That night, Vivian confronted him again. Enough, Jasper. I know what you're doing. You tried to poison my father. Now you're trying to take away his life piece by piece. I won't let you. His laughter was sharp, bitter. You won't let me? Vivian, you're mine. Everything you are, everything you have, belongs to me, including him. No, she said firmly, her voice trembling but resolute. Not anymore. Something in her tone rattled him. His hand twitched as if to strike her, but he stopped, his eyes darting to me standing in the doorway. You'll regret this, he hissed, and stormed out. The slam of the door echoed through the house like a gunshot. For the first time in months, Vivian collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I should have seen it sooner, Dad. I should have believed you the first time. I held her close, stroking her hair like I had when she was a child. It's not your fault, Vivian. Love makes us blind. But now your eyes are open. That's what matters. Bowen. She pulled back, her face wet with tears, but her jaw set with determination. Then we fight. Together. Her words filled me with a strength I thought I had lost. Jasper wanted me broken, erased. But he had underestimated one thing. The bond between father and daughter. And bonds like that don't break easily. That night, as I lay awake, I realized the battle was no longer about survival. It was about justice. Jasper had crossed every line. Poison, lies, humiliation, control, his darkness knew no end. But darkness always fears the light. And now, Vivian and I would shine that light, no matter the cost. The morning after Jasper's outburst, the house was unnervingly quiet. No slamming doors, no heavy footsteps echoing down the hall, no sarcastic remarks thrown like daggers across the dinner table. It was as though the storm had passed, but I knew better. Silence, in Jasper's world, was never peace. It was preparation. Vivian sat with me at the kitchen table, her face pale but resolute. He won't stop, Dad. He'll try something else. We have to be ready. I nodded slowly. The question is, how? She bit her lip, glancing at the clock. If we go to the police, he'll twist the story. He's too smooth. And with his money, he can buy their sympathy. She was right. I'd seen men like Jasper before in uniform, in politics, in business. They thrived in the shadows, their crimes hidden behind charm and connections. No, the law wouldn't save us. Not yet. We need proof. I said firmly. Solid evidence that even his money can't bury. Vivian met my eyes and gave a small, determined nod. Then we'll get it. The first sign of Jasper's next move came 2 days later. I returned from the market, arms laden with groceries, when 2 police officers stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Alden?" one asked. "Yes?" I replied cautiously. "You're under investigation for theft." The words hit me like a bullet. Theft? From who? The officer handed me a paper. Jasper's name was written at the top. He had filed a report claiming several expensive items had gone missing from his study watches, cash, a gold lighter. Items, he insisted, that I had been seen near. It was a trap. I clenched the paper in my hands, fury rising. This is a lie. The officer shifted uncomfortably. It may be, sir, but we have to follow procedure. Stay available for questioning. They left as quickly as they came, their car tires crunching down the gravel driveway. I stood frozen, my breath shallow. Jasper was no longer satisfied with threats. He was building a case to destroy me legally. Vivian appeared at the door, panic in her eyes. "Dad, what happened?" When I explained, she trembled with rage. "He's trying to make you look like a criminal." "Yes," I said grimly. "And if he succeeds, I'll lose everything. My pension, my name, even you." That night, Jasper returned home as if nothing had happened. He breezed through the door, loosening his tie, his expression smug. "Rough day?" he asked casually, pouring himself a drink. I stared at him in silence. He relished the tension, sipping slowly. "Don't take it personally, old man. It's just business. The world thinks you're a bitter relic clinging to respect you don't deserve. I'm simply helping them see it." Vivian stood, trembling, her voice cutting through the room. "You're a monster, Jasper. You can try to bury us, but the truth will come out." He chuckled. "Truth? My dear, truth is whatever people believe, and people believe me." He leaned in close to me, his whisper dripping venom. "By the time I'm done, you'll be the one in chains." The following days blurred into a careful dance of survival. I knew Jasper was watching, waiting for me to slip, to give him reason to strike harder. Vivian and I acted normal when he was around, but in secret we began our own mission. She retrieved an old voice recorder from her drawer, slipping it into her pocket whenever Jasper was home. "Every word he says can be used," she told me quietly. "If we catch him slipping, even once, it's enough." It was risky, but it was all we had. One night, fortune tilted our way. Jasper, drunk and careless, ranted in the living room while pacing back and forth. Vivian, seated on the sofa, kept her recorder running in her lap. "You think you're safe because he's your father?" Jasper snarled. "Let me tell you something. I can get rid of him any time I want. Poison, an accident, even prison. No one would question it. They'd thank me for cleaning up the mess." Vivian's face stayed composed, though her knuckles tightened. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" he sneered. "You know how easy it is to buy a story? One signature, one phone call, and your beloved father disappears. And you," he jabbed a finger toward her, "you'll have nowhere to go but back to me." He staggered toward the bar, refilling his glass, unaware of the device recording every venomous word. When he finally collapsed on the couch, passed out cold, Vivian slipped into my room, eyes shining with adrenaline. "Dad," she whispered, pressing the recorder into my hands. "We got him." For the first time in months, hope stirred in my chest. Jasper's arrogance had given us a weapon, his own voice. But we couldn't move too soon. We needed more, enough to make him untouchable. And so we waited, gathering every slip of his tongue, every cruel boast he let slip when whiskey dulled his caution. Yet Jasper, too, was tightening his snare. One morning, as I stepped outside to fetch the mail, I noticed something strange. A police cruiser sat idling across the street, its engine humming. The officer inside didn't even pretend to look casual. He was watching the house. Inside the mailbox was another letter, this one far more dangerous. It was a summons. Jasper had filed a restraining order, claiming I had threatened him with violence. Vivian read the paper aloud, her hands shaking. He says you came into his study with a knife, that you told him you'd kill him. I laughed bitterly. And they believe this? Her eyes darkened. They don't need to believe it fully, Dad. Just enough to keep you under suspicion. He's setting you up for something worse. The walls were closing in. Jasper's trap was almost ready to snap shut. That evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, I stood at the window, watching his shadow move through the house. My heart pounded with grim clarity. He won't stop, Vivian, I said quietly. Not until one of us is gone. She stood beside me, her hand slipping into mine. Then we make sure it isn't you. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with resolve. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was my ally, my soldier, standing shoulder to shoulder with me in a war we never asked for but could no longer avoid. Jasper thought he was the hunter, weaving his traps around us. But he had forgotten one thing. I had survived real battlefields before, and I would survive this one too. The difference was this time I wasn't fighting alone. The tension in the house thickened with each passing day. Jasper's calculated charm never slipped when neighbors or guests came around. He smiled, laughed, played the role of doting husband. But behind closed doors, he was sharpening his knives. Vivian and I knew he was building toward something. The restraining order, the fabricated theft, the officers stationed nearby, they weren't the endgame. They were groundwork. He wanted me ruined completely, and soon. I felt it one night when I caught him watching me across the dinner table, his smirk faint but deliberate. He didn't need to speak. His eyes said it all. I've already won. The attack came the following evening. I was in the garage, fixing the old radio, when a sudden crash echoed through the house. A scream followed Vivian's scream. My heart leapt as I bolted inside. Jasper stood in the living room, shirt torn, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. A chair lay overturned beside him. She's hysterical, he bellowed as I rushed in. Your daughter tried to kill me. Vivian was in the corner, breath ragged, eyes wide with disbelief. That's a lie, she shouted. You did this to yourself. But Jasper wasn't talking to her. He was talking to the two police officers who suddenly stormed through the door as though they'd been waiting. Arrest him, Jasper cried, pointing at me. He snapped! He attacked me with the chair. I barely got away. I froze, realization flooding through me. He hadn't just staged the theft or the threats. He'd staged an assault and planted me right at the center of it. The officers advanced. Mr. Alden, one said, hand on his cuffs. You'll need to come with us. Vivian rushed forward, standing between us. No! He didn't touch him! Jasper's lying! Jasper groaned theatrically, pressing his hand to his cut. She's covering for him. She's always been his little shadow. But you saw the restraining order! You know what kind of man he is! I clenched my fists, fury rising. This is madness. He's playing you all. but I knew it was useless. Jasper had laid the trail of breadcrumbs, perfectly theft, threats, and now violence. To the police, it looked like escalation. To them, it looked like I was dangerous. As the officers led me toward the door, Vivian's voice broke through the chaos. "Wait!" she shouted, pulling something from her pocket. It was the recorder. Her hand shook, but her voice was steady as she pressed play. Jasper's drunken voice filled the room. "I can get rid of him any time I want. Poison, an accident, even prison. No one would question it. They'd thank me for cleaning up the mess." The officers froze. Jasper's face drained of color. "Where did you—" he sputtered. Vivian's eyes blazed with fury. "You think you're clever, Jasper, but every word you've said has been recorded." She let another clip play his boast about framing me, about buying stories, about making me disappear. His own voice, damning him more thoroughly than any witness ever could. The room shifted. The officers glanced at each other uneasily. One cleared his throat. "Mr. Alden, perhaps you should come with us voluntarily, just to sort this out. But we'll be needing a statement from all parties." Jasper's composure cracked. His smile faltered, his jaw tightening. He stepped forward, voice raised. "That recording means nothing. It's out of context. A drunk man rambling doesn't prove anything." But his voice carried a sharp edge of desperation now, and the officers heard it. Vivian held the recorder close to her chest, her chin lifted. "It proves enough to show who the real danger is here. And if you touch my father again, Jasper, I'll make sure everyone in this town hears every word of it." The officers didn't arrest Jasper that night. They couldn't. Not without a formal complaint and a deeper investigation. But they didn't arrest me either. Instead, they left with careful warnings and promises to look into the matter further. Jasper slammed the door behind them, his face red with fury. "You think you've won something?" he hissed at Vivian. "All you've done is poke the bear. That little toy of yours won't save him when the real storm comes." Vivian stood tall, fire in her eyes. "No, Jasper, it already has." After he stormed off to his study, Vivian collapsed into a chair, her strength finally giving way. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them. "Dad," she whispered, voice breaking, "I thought they were really going to take you away." I placed my hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "You saved me. You turned the tide tonight." But even as I said it, I knew the war wasn't over. Jasper wasn't the kind of man to back down after being cornered. He would strike harder, with more precision, more cruelty. Vivian lifted her head, her tear-streaked face hardening. "Then we strike first." That night, while Jasper drowned himself in whiskey upstairs, we sat together at the kitchen table, whispering plans into the dim light. "We can't rely on the police," I said. "Not yet. But if we gather enough, not just his words, but proof of his schemes, his lies, then even his money won't save him." Vivian nodded, her eyes fierce. "We need allies, people who can't be bought, people who will listen." Nigh. For the first time, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this wasn't just survival anymore. Maybe we could actually bring him down. But hope was dangerous, and I knew Jasper too well. He wouldn't lick his wounds quietly. No, he was already plotting his next move. And when it came, it would be the deadliest one yet. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard Jasper's footsteps pacing above me in the study. Slow, measured, like a predator circling its prey. The war was far from over. It was only just beginning. The days after the staged assault crawled with unease. Every hour felt like a countdown, though to what, I wasn't sure. Jasper's mask of charm never cracked when outsiders were around, but in the quiet of the house, his silence was louder than any insult. Vivienne and I lived like soldiers in enemy territory, whispering in corners, checking locks twice, never leaving without watching each other's back. We knew Jasper wasn't retreating. He was recalculating. One night, I woke to the faint sound of glass clinking in the kitchen. My instincts sharpened instantly. I slipped out of bed, moving silently down the hallway. There he was, Jasper, crouched at the counter, carefully sprinkling something into the pot of stew left cooling for tomorrow. His hands moved with chilling precision, his face calm, almost serene. Poison. For a moment, my blood ran cold. It was no longer a war of reputation, no longer a smear campaign. This was the endgame quiet murder, disguised as a tragic accident. I stepped back, pulse racing, forcing myself not to confront him right then. If I accused him without proof, he'd twist it, as always. But if I waited, if I caught him red-handed, then his empire of lies would finally collapse. The next morning, Jasper played his role flawlessly. He smiled as he ladled the stew, placing a steaming bowl in front of me. "Eat up, old man," he said smoothly. "You look like you need your strength." Vivienne's eyes darted between us. She knew. She must have seen the tension in my jaw, the way I didn't lift my spoon. "Not hungry," I muttered, pushing the bowl away. Jasper's smirk twitched. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the predator beneath his skin. That evening, Vivienne and I sat together in the attic, the one place Jasper never bothered with. She held the recorder in her hand, her fingers tracing the edges like it was a weapon. "We can't just collect scraps anymore," she whispered. "He's trying to kill you. We need to expose him fully in front of people he can't silence." I nodded slowly. "The town council, the church committee, people who respect your mother's memory. If we bring them evidence, his words, his actions, they'll listen." Vivienne's eyes burned with determination. "Then we make him incriminate himself, not just in secret but where it counts." The plan began to take shape. We would provoke him, corner him until his temper snapped and his true self tore through the mask. If we could record that not drunken boasts or vague threats, but a direct confession, then no amount of money could shield him. It was dangerous. A wounded predator lashes out most violently when cornered, but it was the only way. 2 nights later, the perfect moment arrived. Vivienne invited Jasper into the parlor under the pretense of reconciliation. She played her role masterfully, her voice soft, her eyes lowered, as if weary from the constant battles. "Maybe we should stop fighting," she said quietly, pouring him a drink. "Maybe I was wrong to doubt you. Maybe we can start over." I watched from the shadowed doorway, the recorder hidden in my pocket. Jasper relaxed, leaning back in his chair, pride gleaming in his eyes. "Finally," he said, sipping the whiskey. "You're learning. Fighting me was always pointless." "I win, Vivienne. I always win." Her voice trembled just enough to sound convincing. "Even against my father?" Jasper's grin widened. "Especially against your father. That stubborn fool thinks he can outsmart me? He won't last. If prison doesn't break him, poison will. Either way, he's gone." The words fell like stones into the silence. I pressed the recorder in my pocket, my heart pounding. It was the confession we'd been waiting for, deliberate, unguarded, undeniable. Vivienne's facade cracked. She slammed her hand on the table, her voice rising with fury. "You admit it. You admit you tried to poison him." Jasper's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. His eyes flicked to me in the doorway, and in that instant, he realized the trap. "You," he snarled, rising from his chair. But before he could lunge, I stepped forward, holding the recorder high. "It's over, Jasper. Your lies, your schemes, your poison, all of it is here. And this time, you won't twist your way out." For the first time, true panic flickered across his face. But it quickly hardened into something darker, more dangerous. "You think a recording will stop me?" he spat. "You think anyone will take the word of a bitter old man and a gullible girl over mine?" He advanced slowly, menace dripping from every step. "I built this life, this house, this family, and if I have to burn it all down to keep control, I will." Vivian stood, unflinching, her voice steady as steel. "No, Jasper, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet." That night, we smuggled the recorder to a trusted ally, Pastor Elias, the one man Jasper couldn't bribe or threaten. He listened, his face grave, his hands trembling slightly as Jasper's confession played out. This is enough," he murmured. "Enough to bring before the council, enough to call the authorities properly. He can't escape this." For the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest lift, just slightly. We had him. Truly had him. But deep down, I knew Jasper wasn't finished. A man like him didn't surrender, didn't walk quietly into ruin. No, he would strike one last time, and when he did, it would decide everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the window, staring out into the darkness, listening for footsteps, for creaks in the hallway, for anything that might signal Jasper's next move. The war had reached its breaking point. Only one of us would walk away whole. The morning after Pastor Elias heard the recording, a strange calm lingered over the house. The air was brittle, charged, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Vivian moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing tea, her face pale but resolute. I sat at the table, hands clasped, the recorder gone from my pocket and safely with Elias. We had what we needed. Proof. Witnesses. Allies. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the next breath. Jasper had disappeared early that morning without a word, and silence from him was always the loudest warning. When he finally returned, it was well past sundown. The slam of the front door rattled the windows. His footsteps thundered down the hall before he appeared in the kitchen, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Vivian froze mid-motion, the teacup trembling in her hand. Jasper's eyes were wild, bloodshot, his shirt half untucked as if he'd been pacing for hours. His voice was low, but sharp as broken glass. "You think you've beaten me," he hissed, fixing me with a murderous glare. "You think a pathetic little priest and a tape recorder will undo everything I've built?" I said nothing. My silence seemed to fuel his rage. Vivian stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear I knew churned inside her. "It's over, Jasper. Everyone knows. Pastor Elias is bringing the council together. By tomorrow, you'll be finished." For a split second, his face twitched, fear, rage, maybe both before twisting into something feral. "Finished?" he snarled. "Number? No. I decide when it ends. Not you. Not your decrepit father. And sure as hell not some sanctimonious preacher." Then he reached into his coat. My heart seized. The glint of steel caught the dim kitchen light, a knife, long and sharp, clenched in his fist. Vivian gasped, stepping back, but he advanced. His voice was low, shaking with fury. You left me no choice. If you'd just learned your place, Vivienne, if you'd stood by me instead of conspiring with that old fool, none of this would have been necessary. He turned his gaze on me, teeth bared. But now, I'll finish this tonight. I rose slowly from the chair, squaring my shoulders, every muscle taut. My hands trembled, but I forced them still. Then you'll have to go through me. The tension snapped like a bowstring. Jasper lunged, the knife flashing toward me. I caught his arm, the blade grazing past my ribs as I twisted, shoving him backward. The crash of the struggle echoed through the house, the scrape of shoes on the floor, the slam of bodies against furniture. Vivienne screamed, darting for the drawer where we kept the heavy iron poker. She grabbed it, holding it like a sword, her eyes blazing. "Stop it, Jasper," she shouted, her voice breaking. "You'll destroy everything, yourself included." But Jasper only roared, wrenching free from my grip. His knife slashed the air inches from my face, the force of it whistling by my ear. Adrenaline burned in my veins. I wasn't young anymore, my joints screamed, my breath came ragged, but something primal kept me on my feet. Every strike, every dodge was fueled by a father's instinct, the iron will to shield his child. Vivienne circled us, trembling but fierce, waiting for her moment. "Call the police," I barked. "I can't leave you." Now Vivienne. Reluctantly, she darted toward the hallway phone, but Jasper's hand shot out, shoving her back. The poker clattered from her hands as she hit the floor. For a moment, time froze, his shadow looming over her. Knife raised high. Something inside me snapped. With a roar I hadn't felt in years, I lunged forward, slamming into him with all the force left in my body. The knife tumbled across the floor as we crashed into the table, splintering wood and shattering dishes. We grappled in the wreckage, Jasper's fists pounding, mine clawing, both of us desperate, savage, beyond words. His strength was frightening, but desperation made me stubborn, unyielding. Vivienne scrambled, grabbing the knife before Jasper could reclaim it. She held it out, her hands shaking violently, pointing it toward him. "Don't move," she screamed, her voice ragged with terror. "I'll use it, Jasper, I swear I will." He froze, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. His eyes darted from me to her, to the blade in her trembling grip. And then, slowly, he laughed. A hollow, bitter sound that curdled the air. "You don't have it in you," he sneered. "You're too soft, Vivienne, just like your mother." Her hands shook harder, but her gaze never wavered. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Don't test me." The standoff stretched, heavy and suffocating. My own breath came ragged, blood dripping from a cut above my brow. I could feel Jasper's muscles coiled beneath my grip, ready to explode again. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the wail of sirens. Vivienne's call had gone through. Jasper's face flickered disbelief, rage, then a glimmer of fear. His empire of lies, his mask, his control all crumbling in the face of flashing blue lights. He wrenched free one last time, but instead of charging, he bolted for the back door. "Coward!" Vivienne screamed after him. The slam of the door shook the house. Moments later, officers swarmed through, their shouts filling the rooms. Pastor Elias arrived not long after, clutching the recorder like sacred scripture. Vivienne and I stood together amid the wreckage of the kitchen, bruised, battered, but alive. And Jasper? He was gone, vanished into the night like a wounded beast, cornered but not yet caged. That night, as the house finally fell into silence, Vivian sat beside me, her head against my shoulder. Her body trembled, but her voice was soft, steady. "Do you think he'll come back?" I stared into the darkness beyond the window, knowing the truth neither of us wanted to admit. "Yes," I whispered, "but next time, he won't be running. Next time, he'll come for blood." The days that followed felt like living inside the pause between lightning and thunder. Everyone knew the storm wasn't over, it was only circling, gathering strength. The police had scoured the countryside but found no trace of Jasper. His abandoned truck had been discovered near the river bend, but the man himself had slipped through like smoke. Vivienne barely slept. I'd find her pacing the halls at night, staring out windows as if expecting him to materialize in the shadows. Even Pastor Elias, steady as a stone, confessed in quiet moments that he felt a darkness not yet finished with us. Despite it all, the town began to stir. The council set a meeting for the coming Sunday. Elias would present the recordings, and the people would hear Jasper's venom with their own ears. It was supposed to be the beginning of justice, a chance to drag his mask from his face in public view. But in the marrow of my bones, I knew Jasper wouldn't wait quietly to be exposed. On the third night after his escape, proof arrived. A rock smashed through our living room window, scattering glass across the floor. Wrapped around it was a note, scrawled in a hand I knew too well. "You think you can shame me? Betray me? You will regret this." The words burned in the candlelight, the strokes jagged, furious. Vivian's face drained of color. She held the note like it might cut her fingers. "He's watching us," she whispered. I took it from her gently, folding it away. "Then we'll be ready." We reinforced the doors. We set lanterns at every corner of the house. Elias even moved in for the week, determined to stand with us. He prayed often, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying the same gnawing fear we all carried. Still, there was no denying Jasper's presence. We'd hear the crunch of footsteps in the gravel outside at night, a faint laugh carried on the wind, a silhouette by the barn that vanished when approached. It was psychological warfare. Jasper reminding us he was near, that he was the predator and we the prey. By Saturday evening, Vivian broke. She slammed her fists onto the table, tears blazing down her face. "I can't live like this anymore, Father," she cried. "Every creak, every shadow, I feel him breathing down my neck. We should just leave, run far away, and never look back." Her words twisted the knife in my chest because I wanted the same. But I shook my head slowly. "If we run now, Vivienne, he wins. He'll keep hunting us, wherever we go. The only way to end this is to face him here, where he began his war against us." Elias placed a hand on hers, his voice calm but firm. "Your father is right. The truth must be spoken, no matter how dangerous. Once the town hears his own words, Jasper will have nowhere to hide." Vivian nodded reluctantly, but her eyes brimmed with dread. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, shotgun across my knees, staring into the dark fields. The moon was a thin, crooked smile in the sky. And then, faintly, I saw a flicker of light near the barn. I rose quietly, signaling Elias to stay with Vivian. My boots crunched softly on the grass as I crept closer. The smell hit me first. Acrid, bitter. Then I saw the flames licking at the barn wall, the fire spreading fast. "Fire!" I roared, racing forward. Vivian and Elias rushed out, their screams joining mine as we grabbed buckets, blankets, anything we could to fight the blaze. The night filled with the roar of fire, the sting of smoke clawing at our throats. And through it all, just beyond the tree line, I saw him, Jasper, his silhouette tall and still, arms folded, watching his chaos consume. Our eyes locked. His smile glinted in the firelight. Then he melted into the trees, gone before I could give chase. We managed to save the house, but the barn collapsed into smoldering ruin. Livestock gone, tools destroyed, years of work reduced to ash. Vivienne wept into her hands. Elias stood with soot on his face, his lips moving silently in prayer. I clenched my fists until my nails bit skin. Jasper wasn't just taunting us anymore. He was dismantling our lives piece by piece, ensuring that when the end came, there would be nothing left of us to salvage. The next morning was Sunday, the day of the council. We arrived at the church early, the recorder clutched tightly in Elias's hand. Word had spread quickly about the fire, and the pews filled with townsfolk buzzing with rumor and unease. Vivienne sat beside me, her hands trembling in her lap. Her face was pale, but her eyes carried a quiet fire. When Elias rose to the pulpit, the room fell silent. His voice carried strong and steady, speaking of truth, of justice, of wolves who masquerade as shepherds. Then he pressed play. Jasper's voice filled the church, venomous and raw, dripping with contempt. Every slur, every threat, every confession of malice rang through the rafters. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers rose, faces turned pale. By the time the recording ended, the air was heavy with shock and anger. "This," Elias declared, lifting the recorder high, "is the man who has deceived you. This is Jasper Hale." The doors banged open. Gasps erupted. Jasper himself stood in the entry, disheveled, eyes blazing with fury. His presence was electric, terrifying like a storm tearing through stained glass. "You dare!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the church. "You poison my name before these sheep? You think you can ruin me with lies and tricks?" Dozens of townsfolk rose, shouting back, some in fear, some in outrage. The church erupted into chaos. Jasper's gaze found me through the uproar. His lips curled into a grin that promised violence. "This isn't over, old man," he growled. "Tonight, it ends." Then, before anyone could stop him, he vanished into the daylight, leaving the church in turmoil and every heart pounding with dread. That night would be the reckoning, and we all knew it. The air was heavy that night, thick and oppressive, as though the very sky itself sensed what was coming. Clouds smothered the moon, plunging the farm into uneasy darkness. Every sound carried the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves like omens whispering through the stillness. Inside, we sat together in silence. Elias kept his Bible open, but his eyes rarely moved across the page. Vivienne paced the floor like a caged bird, her hands clenched tight, her breaths shallow. I sat by the door with the shotgun resting across my lap, my finger brushing the trigger guard. The church had been a turning point, but not the one we had hoped for. People had seen the truth with their own eyes, heard Jasper's bile with their own ears. But they had also seen his fury. His words, "Tonight it ends," clung to us like smoke, and so we waited. It was just past midnight when it began. The first sound was subtle, the crunch of tires on gravel. Then the growl of engines, more than one, cutting through the night. Vivienne froze. Elias lifted his head slowly, lips moving in silent prayer. I rose, heart pounding, and peered through the curtain. Headlights. Two trucks, then a third, rolling slowly up the drive. Figures jumped from the beds, shadows moving with purpose. Merciful God, Elias whispered. Jasper hadn't come alone. Upstairs. Both of you, I ordered, my voice low and urgent. Vivian shook her head, panic in her eyes. No! I won't leave you! Go! I barked, sharper than I intended. Now, bolt the door, stay quiet. Don't come out unless I call for you. Elias put a steady hand on her shoulder, guiding her. Come, child! They disappeared up the stairs, the floor creaking under their retreating steps. I turned back to the door, chest heaving. The trucks idled outside, their engines a constant growl. Shadows moved across the windows. Then came the voice, Jasper's voice, booming across the yard. Come out, old man. Come face me. Or shall I come in and drag you out like the coward you are? The men with him, rough, cruel-looking shapes in the firelight of their torches, jeered and shouted. One smashed a bottle against the fence. Another hurled a stone at the side of the house, the crack echoing like a gunshot. I gripped the shotgun tighter, stepping into the doorway. Leave this place, Jasper, I called, my voice carrying across the night. You've already lost. The whole town knows who you are now. You can't silence the truth. A cruel laugh rolled out from the dark. Jasper stepped forward, torchlight dancing across his face. He looked wilder than ever, eyes gleaming with rage, hair matted, his once proud clothes filthy and torn. Truth? He spat. You think these fools care about truth? They only believe what I tell them to. I've built this town with my bare hands, and I'll burn it down before I let you take it from me. His hand rose, and in it glinted steel, a pistol. The men behind him hooted and hollered, emboldened by the sight. My blood ran cold, but I stood firm. This isn't the way, I said, forcing calm into my voice. You don't have to drag everyone into your fall. It's not too late to. The crack of the gun cut me off. The shot whizzed past the doorframe, splintering wood inches from my head. Jasper's grin widened. Talk, talk, talk. Always the old man's wisdom. Tonight, we end this with blood. The night erupted. His men surged forward, hurling torches at the barn's charred ruins, then at the shed, igniting whatever they could. Flames licked upward, smoke curling into the sky. The air filled with a chaos of fire and shouting. I raised the shotgun and fired into the air, the blast booming across the yard. The men faltered, startled, but Jasper's laugh cut through the noise. Fight me, he roared. Face me, or I'll drag your daughter out and show her what happens to traitors. From upstairs came a muffled cry. Vivian, unable to contain her fear. Jasper's head snapped toward the house, his grin turning feral. Ah, there she is. Rage like I'd never felt before surged through me. I stepped out onto the porch, shotgun raised, the fire's glow painting the night in hellish red. Touch her, and it'll be the last thing you ever do, I growled. The standoff held for a heartbeat, Jasper grinning, his men tense, the fire crackling around us. Then, with a roar, Jasper lifted his pistol and fired again. The blast ripped through the night. Pain seared across my shoulder, the force knocking me back against the wall. My shotgun clattered to the ground. I gasped, clutching the wound, hot blood seeping between my fingers. Father, Vivian screamed from above. Her voice spurred me, fueled me. Through the haze of pain, I scrambled for the shotgun, lifting it once more. Jasper advanced across the yard, pistol gleaming, eyes locked on me with murderous intent. Behind him, his men circled, some hesitant, some eager for violence. The fire's glow painted their faces in devilish light. This was it, the night Jasper had promised, the night he intended to end us. And though pain racked my body, a single thought burned clear in my mind. If this was to be my last night, I would not fall without dragging Jasper Hale into the grave beside me. The night burned. Flames devoured the barn's ruins, sparks leaping into the air like fireflies from hell. Smoke curled thick and acrid, filling my lungs with every breath. The cries of Jasper's men mixed with the crackle of fire, a symphony of chaos. But in the center of it all was Jasper Hale. He stalked across the yard toward me, pistol raised, eyes gleaming with madness. The firelight danced across his face, revealing a man consumed by rage, stripped of any humanity he might once have claimed. I pressed my hand tighter against the wound in my shoulder, but I refused to let my knees buckle. The shotgun felt heavy in my hands, but it was steady. My heart hammered, not with fear, but with resolve. Above me, the window creaked open. "Father." Vivian's voice trembled. She leaned out, Elias gripping her arm to hold her back. Her face glistened with tears, hair tangled from panic. "Stay inside," I shouted, never taking my eyes off Jasper. "Do not come down." Jasper's grin twisted into something vile. "She'll watch you fall, old man. She'll watch her father bleed in the dirt while I take everything from her." He raised his pistol. I dropped flat, rolling into the mud. The gunshot cracked, splintering the porch beam above me. I swung the shotgun up and fired. The blast roared. Jasper staggered, his shoulder jerking back, the pistol slipping from his hand. For an instant, hope flared in my chest, but then he straightened, clutching his arm, eyes blazing hotter than the flames around us. "Not enough," he growled, spitting blood. "You'll need more than that to kill me." His men hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Some edged backward, spooked by the violence, the fire, the madness in Jasper's eyes. Others brandished bats and chains, unsure whether to charge. "Stand and fight, you cowards!" Jasper barked, his voice cracking with fury. "If he lives, he'll take everything from us." But even they could see this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me and Jasper, locked in a battle that had been building from the moment he first set foot on my land. One by one, his men stepped back, leaving the circle. Firelight reflected in their eyes, shame and fear written on their faces. They would not interfere. It was just him and me. He lunged, tackling me hard to the ground. My shotgun flew from my grip, skidding across the dirt. Pain flared white-hot through my wounded shoulder as we rolled, fists and fury colliding. Jasper straddled me, his fists hammering down. One struck my jaw, the other my chest. Stars burst across my vision, the taste of iron flooding my mouth. But rage raw, unyielding rage drove me. With a roar, I twisted, shoving upward, and we rolled again. My knee slammed into his ribs, my elbow catching his temple. He snarled like a beast, clawing for my throat. "Everything you have should have been mine," he spat, breath hot with whiskey and hatred. "The respect, the land, the family, it should have been me." "You were given a chance," I hissed, straining against him. "And you poisoned it. You poisoned everything." We broke apart, staggering to our feet. Blood streaked our faces, sweat stung our eyes. Around us, the fire grew higher, consuming the outbuildings, painting the night in a hellish glow. Jasper reached for a broken board lying in the dirt, nails jutting like fangs. He swung it wide, missing me by inches, the nails tearing my sleeve. I snatched up a rock and hurled it. It cracked against his jaw, sending him reeling. For a heartbeat, we both stood there, two men broken, battered, fueled only by hate and survival. Then he charged again, roaring like a mad bull. From the porch came a sudden cry, "Father!" Vivienne. She had thrown the door open despite my command. Her white nightdress glowed in the firelight as she rushed out, Elias shouting after her. "Vivienne, no!" I shouted. But her eyes were locked on me and then on Jasper. He saw her too. And in that moment, his face twisted into something even darker. "If I can't break you, I'll break her," he snarled. He spun, lunging toward her. Time slowed. The fire roared, men shouted. Elias cried out, but all I saw was Jasper's shadow lunging at my daughter. With every last ounce of strength, I dove, tackling him from behind. We crashed into the dirt, his board flying from his grip. He twisted beneath me, eyes wild, teeth bared. His hands scrabbled for my throat again, but my own reached for the shotgun lying just feet away. I stretched, fingers clawing through the dirt. Jasper slammed his elbow into my side, pain exploding through my ribs. At last, my hand found cold steel. I swung the shotgun up just as Jasper lunged again, his hands reaching for my face. The barrel pressed against his chest. His eyes widened rage, giving way to shock, then to the briefest flicker of fear. "You brought this on yourself," I rasped. And I pulled the trigger. The blast thundered across the yard. Jasper's body jerked, then went limp. His eyes rolled back, his mouth falling open in a silent gasp. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Even the fire seemed to hush. Then his body slumped into the dirt, lifeless. It was over. The men who had followed him backed away, pale, shaken. One dropped his torch, another muttered a prayer. Without a word, they fled into the darkness, leaving their leader's corpse behind. Vivienne collapsed to her knees beside me, sobbing, clutching at my uninjured arm. Elias hurried after, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Father, oh father," Vivienne whispered. I lowered the shotgun, my hands trembling. Blood soaked my shirt, smoke stung my eyes, but all I felt was the weight of the moment pressing down. Jasper Hale, the man who had tried to destroy us, lay still in the dirt. The nightmare was finished. The flames burned until dawn. Buckets of water, blankets, and trembling hands fought against the fire, but much of the barn and the fields were lost. What remained was blackened earth, scarred timber, and the smell of smoke that would cling to our skin for weeks. Yet somehow, when the sun broke the horizon, it brought with it a strange kind of peace. The night's chaos had ended. Jasper Hale was gone, his men scattered, his grip on our lives shattered like the ashes smoldering at our feet. But peace did not erase the cost. I sat on the porch, shoulder bound tight by Elias's shaking hands. My body ached, every bruise and cut reminding me of what we'd survived. Vivienne knelt beside me, her fingers curled tightly around mine as if afraid I'd vanish if she let go. Her tears had dried, but her eyes, those wide, dark eyes, still carried the storm of fear. "Father," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's over, isn't it?" I looked out at the yard where Jasper had fallen, the dirt still stained dark. His shadow felt heavy, even in death. "Yes," I murmured, "it's over." Word of what happened spread through Willow Creek by mid-morning. Neighbors came in clusters, some to help, some just to stare, others to whisper in disbelief. Never thought Jasper would fall like that. Guess the devil meets his end one way or another. He pushed too far, and look where it got him. Their words washed over me, but I felt no triumph. Killing a man, even one like Jasper, was no victory. It was a necessity, and necessity left no pride behind. Sheriff Danner arrived by noon, a quiet, solemn man with a lined face. He stood at the edge of the yard, hat in hand, eyes scanning the scorched wreckage. "They'll talk about this for years," he said at last, his voice low. "But I'll write it down plain. Self-defense. Everyone saw who brought trouble here. You did what you had to do." His gaze lingered on me. There was no judgment there, only understanding, perhaps even pity. I nodded, my voice too heavy to answer. That evening, Elias sat across from me at the kitchen table. His hands, still raw from binding wounds and hauling buckets, wrapped around a mug of bitter coffee. "You saved us," he said quietly. "Not just Vivian, all of us. If you hadn't stood up..." I shook my head. "Don't make me a hero, Elias. I only did what a father must, what any man would." He studied me for a long moment, then leaned back with a sigh. "Then God help the ones who never had such a father." His words hung heavy in the air. Vivian refused to leave my side that night. She sat at my feet, head resting against my knee, like she had when she was a child frightened by storms. I ran a hand through her tangled hair, and for the first time in years, I felt the fragile thread of family weaving itself whole again. She spoke at last, voice small. "I thought he would take everything. I thought he'd take you from me. Like he took Mother." Her voice cracked, and I tightened my hand gently against her shoulder. "He didn't," I said firmly. "And he never will. We're still here. Together. That's what matters now." Her tears fell silently, but this time they were not of fear. Days passed. The barn was rebuilt plank by plank, neighbors lending hands not out of duty, but out of respect. Elias's laughter returned, softer but truer. Vivian found her strength again, walking with her head higher, her steps steadier. As for me, my body healed slowly, but it was my heart that bore the heaviest scars. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jasper's face in those final moments, rage turning to shock, then to fear. I did not rejoice in his death, but I did not regret it either. It was survival. It was justice delivered the only way it could be. Still, I prayed quietly each night, asking for forgiveness not from men, but from the weight of the heavens above. Months later, Willow Creek began to speak of me differently. The old man who was once mocked for his worn boots and weathered fields became something else in their eyes. They called me the man who stood against a storm, the father who defended his blood at any cost. I didn't care for their words. Titles, whispers, reputations, they meant little. What mattered was this: when my daughter called, I was there. When danger rose, I stood. That was enough. Vivian tended the fields with new fire in her spirit. Elias grew into a steady hand, no longer haunted by shame. And though my bones grew weaker with time, I found myself walking the land each morning, breathing deep, grateful that it was still ours, still home. One evening, as the sun set gold across the fields, Vivian stood beside me. Her eyes shone with quiet strength, no longer shadowed by fear. "You gave me more than life, Father," she said softly. "You gave me courage, and I'll carry that with me, always." I smiled faintly, my hand resting over hers. "And that," I replied, is all a father could ever hope for. The past would never fully leave us. Scars remained, etched deep into memory and soil alike. But from the ashes of betrayal, something stronger grew: love, forged in fire, a bond unbreakable. And so, though Jasper Hale's name would linger in whispers, mine would linger too, not as a man broken by cruelty, but as a father who refused to bow, even when the world tried to break him. That was my story. That was our truth. And it would live long after the last ember faded.